Welcome to the Behavioral Alliance of South Carolina Working Through It Wednesday. Today we are here with Taylor Davis, licensed professional counselor, to share with us a little bit on stress and anxiety management for students. She's got some tips and tricks for our caregivers. And just to share, at the end of her presentation, please follow the QR code and fill out our survey so that we can be sure to meet the needs of our community for the resources that we are sharing. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Taylor Davis, our program manager for the Behavioral Alliance of South Carolina, who is also a licensed professional counselor and has some amazing ideas to share with us in general, as well for caregivers, students, and their families. So thank you so much, Taylor, for being here. You're a light in every room, and we are so glad you are here.
Erin, you're fantastic in every way. I'm so excited to be able to have the opportunity to share these resources. So my goal today is not to make you guys experts in stress relief or experts in the topic of anxiety, but really more to just figure out how can you be really effective helpers? How can you do what you do best, which is showing love and being a great resources for our students, for your kiddos, and for your community members too. So I'm going to share my screen and I'll keep on just talking a little bit and just give you all a little bit of what the rundown is going to be. So we're going to talk about stress and anxiety. We'll talk a little bit about the do's and the don'ts. And then hopefully we'll have enough time for Erin and I to chat a little bit about kind of what we've discussed today and give some feedback. So I'll go ahead and get started. So we are talking about stress and anxiety. And the first thing that comes to mind for me when we're discussing stress and anxiety is, what is the difference between stress and anxiety, right? So these two are definitely walking very parallel to each other, but there is a significant difference between the two. So I've discussed a lot of times about how, everyone has varying degrees of mental health. And certainly all of us have experienced stress, have experienced anxiety. Definitely during the pandemic, we've experienced a lot of stress and anxiety. So we might feel like we're experts in stress and anxiety. But the reality is that they're both emotional responses to stressors. The differentiation between the two is that one has an external stressor, whereas the other is internal. And with stress, that external stressor, typically when it goes away, the stress subsides, right? But with anxiety, what we're looking at is perceived worrisomeness, feeling excessive fears for an extended period of time. And when the stressors go away, that anxiety still really sticks around. Now, for our young ones, if they've got those anxious feelings, those anxious thoughts for over 4 weeks, that's typically an indicator to those of us in the clinical community that we might be looking at a diagnosis of some type of anxiety disorder. So just to reiterate, with stress, we experience stress. When the external stimuli goes away, then we feel a little bit better. So if I'm really worried about a big presentation that I'm about to do, I do the presentation, hopefully I do fantastic at it, stress goes away, I feel better, back to good. Let's say that I'm feeling stressed and anxious about that presentation. I do a great job at the presentation, but I'm still really feeling bad about myself. And I'm still really worrying about what everybody thought of me. And maybe those worries are getting so persistent or so severe or so pervasive that they're impacting how I function in my professional relationships, how I function in my social life. I'm having an inability to be successful in my classes. Then at that point, we're looking at a potential anxiety disorder. So how do we talk about stress and how do we talk about anxiety without amplifying them, right? Because the most important thing that we want to do when it comes to our mental health is to be able to have open and honest conversations about it. So let's take a gander at that. So if I'm worried that my little ones might be dealing with anxiety, or they may be overwhelmed, or they may be stressed, I want to be mindful of my do's and don'ts of helping, right? And there's some very specific do's and don'ts when we're discussing anxiety. But I want to say that and kind of give y'all a caveat, because I don't super love the language do's and don'ts, because I know y'all are phenomenal humans, and I know that you're out there wanting to do the best for your students, wanting to do the best for the young ones or the adolescents in your household. And so some of the things that we may discuss, you may go, oh my gosh, I totally have said that before. No worries, loves. absolutely no worries. If you know better, you do better. One of my favorite phrases. So we don't have these conversations a lot because of the stigma around mental health. So please don't be hard on yourself, right? We're trying to shift from the things that we may want to avoid to the things that we really want to champion and really want to model in terms of behaviors in our household. So don't be hard on yourself is the first rule. Second rule, if you are struggling yourself, right? If you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're just absolutely, your cup is completely full with work, with relationships, with your friendships, with all of the other things that we tend to pile up on our plates, you want to make sure that you are ready to have these conversations first and foremost, right? We want to make sure that you put that oxygen mask on first so that you can feel a lot better and not be as reactive or as prone to thinking, oh man, this might be about me, right? We're less likely to project or have transference when we do that. So let's take a look at the do's and don'ts. And we'll talk a little bit about the don'ts first, and then we'll shift to the do's. So you'll notice here up at the top of your screen, I've got this little arrow, and we're looking at having something to really remind us that it's okay if we've engaged in some of these behaviors before, but we're trying to really move ourselves forward into the do's. You know, we're all individuals that have the capacity to grow, the capacity to change, and we want to do the best that we can do for the individuals that we're serving, that we love, and that we're engaging with. So the first big take homes for this is when you're having these conversations, when you're talking about anything that can be a little bit difficult for anyone to be vulnerable about, right? You want to make sure that you're calm, that you're making sure that you're mindful of your language and that you're not being judgmental, right? And that you're listening, right? You want to listen to understand. Don't listen to respond. It's okay to just sit in silence for a minute and to hold space with somebody. That's one of my favorite things to say. You know, you can just be. And in doing all of those things, what you're immediately communicating is faith in that other person. And one thing that I know is 100% true about our kids, about our young people in the state of South Carolina, in this nation, and across the world, is that they are resilient. So everything that we do just needs to communicate, I believe in you. You got this, love. You can handle whatever you have coming at you, and I'm here for you, right? So let's unpack this a little bit more. So under our don't column, I'm just going to break down each of these phrases, and then we're going to talk about some of the strategies or what we're really attending to when we apply more strength-based language, right? Because words have power, words have meaning, words are important. So if I'm feeling particularly anxious, we may be inclined, or a friend of mine is feeling particularly anxious, or a client of mine is appearing to be particularly anxious, I may want to say something like, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. The problem with don't worry is an individual is already worrying, right? That's a part of the presentation of the symptoms that correlate to anxiety, right? They're already feeling mental and physiological symptoms. Their worry can also be making their hearts race really bad. They could have stomach issues. They could have headaches, right? So when I say don't worry, what we're really saying implicitly is that your concerns are unreasonable. And the reality is that's not what we're trying to communicate in that. So a better way to continue a conversation and communicate that you care is to say something like, tell me more about your worries. I love a good tell me more. Say more about that. Help me understand, right? That's something that is very, very validating. And we want to make sure that our statements are validating, that we're saying, yes, this is real to you. I might not be able to see it. I might not be able to feel it, but it is 100% real to me, and I'm here to help, right? So we want to be validating as opposed to communicating that what someone is feeling, what someone is experiencing is unreasonable. So let's move down to our next one. It's no big deal. What does that sound like to you? It's no big deal. I just talked about the fact you can feel chest pains. You can have significant physiological symptoms. You may not be sleeping. You may be incredibly restless. You may have pervasive negative thoughts that are getting in the way of your every day, of every minute. To say it's no big deal, that is a big deal, right? So we want to make sure that we're not being dismissive. So it's no big deal is actually communicating, just push that aside. It can't be that much of a bother to you. What we could do instead is help model some effective behavior to help someone to be able to calm down, and so that they can figure out how to manage what they're dealing with, because we want to make sure that we're helping individuals learn to cope, right? So saying something like, I can see you're feeling really anxious about this. Let's do some deep breathing. You want to start by grounding someone. So I practice a particular type of therapy where my clients can call me at any point in time if they are feeling like they're in crisis. And one of the goals of that call is not for us to do an entire therapy session, right? It's more so for that individual to realize how to calm themselves down and self-soothe and feel a bit better in that moment. The first thing that I do when they call me is we breathe together and you slow down. How many times have you been in your classroom, you've been in your home, and your kiddos are so wound up, they're so overwhelmed. My mom used to call it like wound up like an old-fashioned top, right? You want to get someone to where they're thinking calmly and clearly, so you just breathe with them. It takes the chaos out of the situation. It calms the individual down so that you can problem solve collaboratively, right? So grounding is really important. Validating and grounding, really key. So next up, we've got the famous "you'll be fine." I don't know about y'all, but fine is a major trigger word. I work a lot with adolescents, with teenagers. Why are you going to tell me that I'm going to be fine? Nothing feels fine to me right now. Nothing feels fine. So we want to avoid those trigger words because that is their reality, right? Perception is their reality. And so that's what they're feeling in that moment. So we want to validate it and we don't want to be judgmental about it. So as opposed to saying you'll be fine, let's communicate support, right? Let's say, I am here to help you. That's both validating and supportive, but also reassuring, right? So we're making sure that everything that we're doing is communicating that you're important to me, your concerns are important to me, and we can move forward from this. You can tolerate this discomfort. Oh, that's a fabulous phrase right there. You can tolerate this discomfort, right? Because if you're feeling that dysregulated, physically and mentally, you're definitely uncomfortable in your own body. You're definitely feeling that there's not much that you can do. So having someone communicate the antithesis of that to you and say they'll walk alongside you, it's really powerful. All right, so we talked about that one of the physiological symptoms, one of the potential presentations of prolonged anxiety is restlessness, insomnia, difficulty sleeping. And we know, especially for our young folk, well, for all of us really, if we're not getting quality sleep, we're not getting that really good deep sleep, we're not able to function the next day. We're not able to manage what the universe is throwing at us. But if I'm to say to you, when I know that maybe you're trying, maybe you're doing everything that you know to do to get yourself to sleep, you've already turned off all your screens, you've done some good deep breathing at night, you've practiced positive affirmations, but you're still really struggling. If I just say you just need to get more sleep, that's kind of minimizing the efforts that you've made and then also how difficult it is for you to be able to achieve that goal, right? So let's be solution focused, but not shaming. So you could say something like, let's use your meditation app together before bed to help relax. That indicates that it's normal to feel stressed out. It's normal to be a little bit anxious. And there's things that we can do collaboratively that can help you to take charge and take control over this symptom. Because remember, these are symptoms, right? This is not the individual. This is a diagnosis. And we're going to talk just in a minute briefly about what it is to externalize this, right? We don't want to label someone and have them walking around like, you know, as their diagnosis. No, it's just a piece of a presentation. You're far more than that, right? And we know that. I know you know that. So next up, it's all in your head. So I just want to sit with that for a second because yes, brain dysfunction is a part of anxiety, right? That dysregulation, those chemical imbalances, that potential heritability, yes, that exists in your brain. I know that's in my head. But to say it's all in your head is shaming, right? Because it's not attending to the fact that you acknowledge those, that you acknowledge that some of your fears may not be realistic, some of your concerns may not be realistic, but they're very real to you. And so it's not my place to judge your pain or say you must, you know, I've walked down this path before. If I can do it, you can do it. No, that's not what it's about. We want to make sure that someone understands that we're not identifying them or labeling them by their diagnosis or by the things that they're dealing with, but rather that we're working to better understand what they're living with, right? As opposed to identifying them as. So that might sound something like, sounds like your brain is worrying a lot right now. Let's take a walk to calm it down. So that does two things, right? That functions in two different ways. It's externalizing. It's not you are worrying a lot right now, right? It's your brain is worrying a lot right now. And then we're also doing something practical and collaborative. And we know that anxiety needs is energy, right? It's energy that needs to get out of your body and into something else. So to take a walk is a fantastic idea, right? To go running, to go play basketball, to do anything to kind of disconnect you from that emotional experience that you're having, and to just shift your perspective over to something else, shift your focus over to something else. Minimally give yourself a little bit of a reprieve, right? If you can do that for 20 minutes a day, make that a part of a routine. And I'm going to put a pin in the idea of routine because that's really key, and come back to the externalizing idea. You noted that we say, your brain is worrying, not you. I know we covered that. With little ones, or with younger students, we may draw an actual worry monster. You may name it, right? Give it a wild name. Let them be creative with it. And then that starts a way for y'all to have a conversation that's not labeling, that's not shaming. And it also helps them to process a little bit more. These are activities that you can definitely do in class, because we have a lot of students that are going to be coming back to us that are going to be very overwhelmed, that are going to be stressed, that may be dealing with separation anxiety. We've had the privilege of being home with our loved ones and our caregivers for a substantial amount of time now. So this is really shifting their perspective. So for my teacher friends out there, please add some of these strategies to your curricula, because that's a fantastic way to not only talk about mental health, but help parents to have a conversation with their kiddos at their dinner tables. And that certainly would function in the virtual setting as well. Now, last but certainly not least, and this is for all of my incredibly loving, big-hearted, wonderful humans out there, my fixers, I'll just do it. No, mamas and papas, that is not the case here. No, my loves, that is not the case here. It cannot be, I'll do it, because that indicates a lack of belief in someone. And we started this conversation with the idea that young people are resilient. They absolutely can do it. This new generation just boggles my mind with what they're capable of. I'm struggling to send an email these days, and they're building applications, right? Like, they can absolutely do this. So we want to communicate that belief in them and promote that resiliency. And we can do that with the language that we use and the strategies that we use to do so. So we might name the feeling, right? I know you feel anxious, but I know you can do it. I'm here to support you. Now, I know I'm saying that a little bit campy, and I'm typically a little bit more level when it comes to how I'm dealing with my kids, a little bit more, I guess, what I would call probably authentic and down to earth. At least I like to think so. Maybe they wouldn't say that. But, I like to be able to speak to them on their level, to say what really comes to my heart. And sometimes for me, it just sounds like, I know you feel really awful right now, man. And I just love you, and I know that you've got this, and I can't wait to see you succeed, because I know it's going to happen and you can't tell me otherwise. So whatever feels authentic and real to you, however you engage with your students, however you typically engage at the home, just be mindful of being strength-based. Just remember that the tiny humans that you have a privilege to have in your life, the mid-sized ones or the kind of big ones, they're a blessing, right? And we really have so many opportunities to embed hope in them, and we can do that with just shifting our language a little bit, shifting our perspective a little bit, making sure that we're being calm, making sure that we're being non-judgmental. And if you are significantly worried about your young person, or you're worried about yourself, or you're worried about a friend or a family member, because you've been seeing this go on for them for a long time and you don't want to see them struggle anymore, remember, you have access to mental health professionals. Everybody deserves a therapist, right? In all of our communities, our State Department of Mental Health has clinics that are available for appointments for youth and for adults. At most of our districts, at many of our districts in the state of South Carolina, we also have access to mental health professionals through the Department of Mental Health. And then, of course, there's other licensed professionals in your communities that you can reach out to. So please know that if you're struggling, if you're feeling really foggy, you're feeling really worried, if there's things that just feel bigger than you, please reach out for help. Get your kiddos help. Heck, go to family therapy together. There's always beauty in being able to grow together. And we know that if one individual in our family unit, whatever that may look like to you, even in your classroom unit, is struggling, then everybody is going to struggle, right? So we want to model those positive behaviors. So I hope that this was helpful to you all, having those do's and don'ts. I want to thank you for taking the time today to engage with us around these topics. And I hope that you took a little bit with you, but minimally, just please know that you're absolutely fabulous for caring, for being concerned. And if you're ever really worried, you can always call 1-800-273-8255. 1-800-273-8255. That's the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, Taylor, for sharing that. It's just very nice to hear how important a validating statement can be. Even in the midst of all the things that we have going on, just offering that validating statement can truly be a therapeutic moment, whether you're a parent, a teacher, any educator, to just say, I hear you and I'm with you, and whatever words you need to use it's one of the most powerful things that we can do. It sounds simple, but it's huge. Thank you for reminding us of that.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's what we try and communicate to everyone. You just got to talk about it, right? We don't want to let those emotions sit within us. And if you see that someone might be struggling, just check in with them, right? Because there's nothing that's going to go awry there. You're just showing, in my eyes, you're just showing love. So I appreciate always having the opportunity to share those little tidbits.
Absolutely. And I would love to also touch on something that you said that triggered something for me in a good way. You mentioned that when we're stressed as parents, educators, teachers, and we're stressed out, and we say to ourselves, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling nervous. So then instead, when something happens in the home, I get upset. I may not have that immediate validating response that I want to have, because my threshold is a little bit lower, my bucket's a little empty. So some things that we can do to support ourselves so that we can build that back up: taking care of yourself as parents, educators, and teachers, knowing those things that we need to do to support our own well-being, whether it's our own deep breathing, our mindfulness app, taking a second to be alone, reading a book, and recharging, refueling, so that we can come back and be there for our kiddos.
Absolutely.
The working from home, also, it works well with your spouse as well, not just your children.
I love it. No, absolutely. You know, we've got to make sure that we're practicing self-care on our own, and oftentimes, especially for those that are in the caregiver role, that's just not always a priority. And so sometimes, and we want to make sure that our systems support saying, if you need to take a breather, take a breather. And thank you for saying that, because it reminded me of one big thing. I just want to say one last thing. Kids thrive with a routine, right? They need to have that structure. So give them the things that help them. If you've got a child that's dealing with anxiety or is really stressed out, give them a good routine. If I know what to expect, what to anticipate, then I'm going to be able to feel a lot safer and secure in my setting. And I know that our educators across South Carolina are incredible about doing these things. So I hope this was helpful, and I look forward to the feedback on our survey. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Taylor. This is the Behavioral Alliance of South Carolina, working through it Wednesday with Taylor Davis. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.